Well, good Wednesday evening, everybody. Taylor Plott here with your latest tropical update. And while it's quiet in the Atlantic Basin, it is not quiet in the Pacific side. We have Hurricane Kristy right now, major Hurricane Kristy, with maximum sustained winds of 155 miles per hour. That makes it a Category 4 hurricane. The pressure right now is 928 millibars, and it's moving west at 20 miles per hour. Now, the good thing about this one is you take a look at the National Hurricane Center track, it's not going to be impacting any land. This will remain out at sea, so this is what we call a fish storm. It will just remain out there in the open ocean as a major hurricane over the next few days, but as we get into the weekend and into early next week, it will weaken. It will start moving over some cooler waters and some higher wind shear, and this will allow it to weaken and eventually move to the northwest and become a extratropical cyclone. Now, what about the Atlantic? There's been a lot of discussion, and it's because of this image right here. This is the latest, or what was the latest GFS from this morning, but this is hour 342. This is all the way out there around November 6th, and it shows a hurricane impacting the Big Bend of Florida. That's very unlikely right now as it stands. That's way out there. Anytime you see a model guidance, especially tropical, that's well past 200 hours, that's not ensemble related. This is not ensemble related. This is what we call deterministic, or deterministic. It's a big word to say sometimes. And basically, that's just one model run. It doesn't show a wide variety of options. So it's very hard to set on one model scenario that is that far out there. But what do the ensembles show? So this is the European ensembles. This goes through day 10. This goes into the beginning of November 2nd. And it does show a high probability of a tropical depression forming somewhere in the southwestern Caribbean. That's not unheard of. I mean, we're still in hurricane season. Hurricane season goes through November. So this is definitely something that shouldn't be a shock to anybody that we see another tropical system develop in the Caribbean. Now, the trick is, once we get into this time of year, there's a lot more troughing activity across the United States, a lot more cold fronts moving through, so there's a less likelihood that something actually moves into the Gulf of Mexico. Same thing with Oscar. Oscar is moving to the west, impacted parts of the Turks and Caicos and parts of the Bahamas. And what did it do? It moved to the northeast and moved out to sea because a cold front picked it up. So that's that time. We're in that time of year now that the Gulf of Mexico kind of gets locked down when it comes to tropical systems. It's not unheard of. It has happened before, but the likelihood gets a lot lower once we get into the end of October and the early part of November. So let's look at what the ensemble is. This is the European ensemble. This is next Wednesday, and it shows that there could be a possible tropical system down there in the Caribbean. You see that little L down there that I've circled. And looking at the steering flow, we have a strong area high pressure off the eastern U.S. That will steer anything generally towards the northwest once it starts getting its influence on a system down there in the Caribbean. But look at what's happening across the central U.S. You see a lot of green out there. There's most likely going to be another area of low pressure that gets going across the central U.S., and that will push a cold front into the eastern U.S. later on next week. Could be around Halloween, could be around the beginning of November 1st or 2nd. So anything down there would eventually be influenced by that. But early on, anything that does develop down there early next week or the middle of next week would likely move to the northwest or the north. But like I said, once we get later on into the week, look what happens. You get towards Saturday of next week, the ensembles are showing that there should be some cold front activity in the eastern United States. You notice that high pressure off the eastern seaboard is a lot weaker, and that would allow any tropical system that does get going down there in the Caribbean and moving to the north would eventually be moving to the northeast. You see all those little green areas down there, so that's where the ensemble, the models are hinting that there's probably some type of tropical activity down there. It could be impacting western Cuba, it could be impacting central Cuba, it could still just be out there in the central Caribbean. So, but the thing is, anything down there would start to move to the northeast as you get more areas of low pressure and troughing activity across the eastern United States. Now, like I said, it's not impossible to get a system in the Gulf of Mexico, but once we get into the early part of November, the likelihood that something gets in the Gulf is a lot less. Most of the time, we will have a cold front that moves through and it gets kicked off to the northeast. So again, that's just something to watch over the next several days. Nothing's developed yet. This is just, once again, we're seeing hints in the Ensemble guidance that something should be brewing in our near future across the Caribbean once again. But like I said, once we get into this time of year, like I'm showing you here, most of the stuff that gets going down there will move to the northeast and most likely won't impact mainland U.S. One caveat to that, however, would be the southern tip of Florida. There's still a chance that a system could move far enough west that when it does get picked up and move to the northeast, that it could impact parts of southern Florida. But as for the Big Bend, as for the northern Gulf Coast, the likelihood is very, very low as it stands right now. So that's just stuff that we're watching out in the tropics. In the meantime, again, nothing imminent. If anything happens to develop, it would be towards the middle of next week. So we'll just keep an eye on things over the coming days. But like I said, anything that's showing hurricane impacting the Big Bend of Florida, the northern Gulf Coast, I would not buy that at the moment. Most likely it will be moving to the northeast and moving away from the United States. So that's your tropical update on this Wednesday. We'll do it again next week. And until then, I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you later on.